Hi everyone. So the alcohol marker colouring is really on trend at the moment, and you can do so many really cool pages and effects with your alcohol markers. But it only goes so far before you might want to add a little bit more detail and definition in with pencil. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I have an illustration here that I've coloured with markers, not this one. This is the cover of the book. I'll show you it in a minute, but the illustrations that I'm going to be showing you are from Mrs. Buttered, and it is an artist that I've just recently started following on Patreon, and I'll leave the link for her Patreon in the description. And these are some of the pages that she has released to her patrons, and I've printed them off and bound them and made a book for myself so that I can keep them all in one place because I absolutely love her illustrations. So I will show you the one that I've coloured with markers, and I did this last night, and you can see it is quite flat. So it's all been coloured with markers. It's very vibrant, but there's not any kind of detail or shadowing apart from where I've done a bit here on the white top and the collar of her jacket. But everything else is very simple and block coloured. And that's because I wanted to show you how to do the extra definition in pencil, because I think that's the next step for people who have maybe started on the marker colouring trend, and they've sort of done all of their different textures and effects and things, and they're just wanting to see how they can incorporate other media into it. And maybe it's easier to transition going from markers to marker basing to pencils alone, because pencils alone can be quite unforgiving. Obviously with markers it covers the area really well, and with pencils it's just a whole different thing to learn. So I'm hoping that this will be a good transition for people who are wanting to up level to pencils from markers. So yes, this is the illustration. As you can see, it is a Pokemon themed illustration. I just absolutely love Mrs. Buttered's work. I will again leave a link to her Patreon so that you can see if you want to join and get access to just loads and loads of pages and downloads. It's absolutely wonderful. This is the one that I coloured the other night with markers, and there's horror ones. It's really cool. There's a lot of witchy stuff. It's very anime, cutesy, fantastical. There's some Alice in Wonderland, there's some space themed illustrations, just loads of really cool stuff. So we're going to work on this one. So I've done my complete base in alcohol markers. Now we're going to look at how to add pencil for definition. So I have my own charts. This one's looking a bit battered. I could probably do with doing it again fresh, but it still works. So this is my Colour Family chart book that I have. Again, it's a book that I created and bound myself. These are all charts that I've designed, and it's got all the top pencil brands that I use, as well as colour combinations for different brands. We've got some skin tone combinations for different brands. And what else is in here? I think I also have some KJ Design by Karen paints that I've swatched as well. Everything in this book, all of my charts are all absolutely free to download and print on my website, colourwithclaire.com/charts. So if you want to go there and get yourself your charts to fill out, that'll be really helpful. Because if you are brand new to this, you've done your marker colouring, but you're just exploring pencils now, you will probably need a swatch chart. A lot of people use them for markers, as do I, but with pencils it's definitely needed, I think, because it's hard to tell exactly what colour you're getting from a pencil just from the barrel or the end alone. So swatch charts are really important, and again, these are all free, so it's just something, a resource that you've got to swatch out your pencils. So what pencils should you use is probably the first question I would get from someone working with markers but not really sure about pencils. And I have a video that is all about the difference between wax and oil based pencils, and I will put that in the description, because pencils are a very personal thing. What you like might not be what another person prefers in their pencil, how it feels as it lays down, how it blends. Oil based pencils are harder and they take a lot of layering to layer them up to be vibrant, whereas the wax based pencils are a lot softer, a lot creamier, but they don't keep their point as well as an oil base, and they blend a little bit better, I think. But anyway, it all depends on how you colour. If you're a hard hand pressure or a soft, it will depend. But watch that video if you want a little bit more insight into oil and wax base. I'm going to be using my Prismas today just purely because they are my favourite coloured pencil, and they are incredible at blending. It really takes no effort whatsoever to blend them, and also they're really good vibrant colours that will go with this illustration. So I've got my chart, I've got my illustration. What I want to start to do is build up that three-dimensional look with the pencil. So this is a Jigglypuff, but he's very flat and not very interesting. So I'm going to look at the pink that I've put down with the markers. I was using Ohuhu markers, and I'm going to see if I can find the equivalent to it here. I think it's probably going to be Deco Pink in the Prismacolor. We may need that pencil to blend out, we may not, so I'm not going to bother with that just yet. But I want to nip over to this family. These families can be interchangeable, by the way. This just shows you sort of the best blends and the undertones of the pencils to show you which ones blend better together. So for example, with undertones, we would say that these purples are more blue, whereas these purples are more red. So it's the undertone of each colour creates the family, but you can interchange them. So this Deco Pink, for example, would work with this blush pink and the pink. The hot pink would work with the processed red, and it's just up to you to sort of try and decide which colours would work best. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine Jigglypuff, but as a more of a 3D character. So I know that I'm going to need a few more deeper colours with this undertone, this pink undertone. So I am thinking we will go, I'm just wondering whether to do hot pink and process or pink and process. I think I might go hot pink process. Okay, so I'm going to grab those from my pencil case. So I've got hot pink and processed red. I'm going to give them a quick sharpen, mind your ears. Pop this chart to one side. And then we're going to think about shadows and where they would be, and also form. So the Jigglypuff is a round creature, so we need to create the look of a rounded form. But we also have shadows from the girl who is stood in front of the Jigglypuff. So this kind of area which overlaps would be in shadow on the Jigglypuff. If something's in front of something, there will be a shadow underneath. So what I would do first is grab the darker of the pinks. So I've got the processed red, and I would start to put in some of these shadows. So you can either start with the form or the shadows. I'm going to start with the shadows. So I can see that this is a little arm here. So I'm going to make sure that the arm has some form there, but I'm also going to come right the way up against where this hair of the Pokemon trainer is casting a shadow behind her. Now I'm using a light to medium pressure, and I'm using a scumbling technique. You may not have heard that before if you are completely used to colouring with markers, but a scumbling technique is where we do rounded motions like this. Obviously I'm exaggerating the size, but it's rounded motions, and we're doing them quite tight together. So little circles to build up the colour. You will notice that your pencil begins to get a little bit chamfered or slanted, the very tip of the pencil, and that's really good. That's what we need. We need to use that slant because we're looking for a very soft haze of a blend. We're not looking for sharp pinpoint precision details or harsh lines. So once you've got your pencil to have that sort of slant on the end, that's exactly where you need to be to create this lovely haze and very soft shading. So I'm going to completely colour this bit of the arm with the processed red because that's more or less all hidden. And then we're going to start at the bottom here and come up. In fact, I'm going to zoom you in because I think you might be a bit far away. So we'll start there and And we will curve because the Jigglypuff is a rounded thing, a rounded creature. So we want to make our blends nice and curvy and not, you know, a straight line here and a straight line up there. So we want it to look nice and soft and cartoonish as well to match the theme of the illustration. So that is a little bit of cast shadow there. And we want some more. This is, I believe, the Jigglypuff's leg. So underneath the head would be in shadow. So we're going to do some shadow down here underneath. And then down here as well, where the trainer is overlapping, casting that shadow backwards. Now when I'm colouring with pencils, I'm not colouring solidly like this right up to the edge of where I want the colour to be. I'm colouring harder and then lighter, making sure I'm on the screen, harder and then lighter as we get to the inner edge, because this area here is going to be where we start to bring in the next colour up, the lighter colour, and that will just help them to blend together. Just having that very, very light, delicate touch of the colour rather than going straight in with the next colour like this, and you've got a very obvious sort of halfway point there where the blend is. But when you've done it like this, you come in with that other colour and it blends so much more seamlessly because you've just given it that little base coat. So back to the shadows. Now I think we would have some shadows here as well, because obviously we're still behind the trainer here. We've got her ear, which I've just realised I've not done her jewellery. I might do that in some gold paint or silver. So we've got a little bit of a shadow there. Again, just keep any of your ends and your edges quite rounded. Okay, and now I think we've got all of the cast shadow bits done. So now it's concentrating on the form of the Jigglypuff. So trying to make it look like a 3D object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more shading here, because this is where the front of the Jigglypuff's body is overlapping his arm a little bit. That's a bit further back. So we want some casting shadow there. And for the form, I'm going to see where this black line is that edges the Jigglypuff's head. I'm going to come away from it a couple of millimeters, and then I'm going to add in a very soft line. So we are leaving a good little bit of space between the black line and the line we've just put in. And this is going to add to that three-dimensional curved look. Now we also have his little, what is this? His little curl on top of his head. So for that, I'm going to see there would be some shadow underneath this part of the curl, because this kind of comes over the front of his face, a bit like hair would on a forehead. So she would have some shadow under her hair here. So we want that little bit of hazy shading just there. And then for the form of the actual curve itself, we want to do something very similar to what we did before. So I'm just going to continue that shadow right around, I think, from the curve, because I feel like this is a whole section by itself that will come over and around. And then I'll do exactly the same as what I did here, and I will add in a shading line just a few millimeters out from the outline, just trying to make sure that you are keeping that space that you've created consistent all the way across. So if you do it sort of very thin and tight to the line here, but then really far away from the outline here, it's going to look a bit strange. So just trying to keep that similar sort of thickness, and then I'll continue it down here as well. Now when you are doing this, it can be really helpful to twist your page because your wrist likes to go this way. It doesn't really like to try and do things like this that's a bit too awkward. So I'm going to just twist this around so that I can keep a consistency in where I'm putting the line. And then I think, yeah, I'm gonna bring that all the way around, I think. Knowing where to put shadows is not something you can just automatically know. If you've been doing it for a while and you know how to you know where a shade would sit on a circular object, a rounded object, a spherical object, then you would sort of be able to guess a bit like I am. But if you haven't done that before, please use a reference photo. You can see if you find a Jigglypuff that someone else has drawn in coloured pencil, it's not copying them to see where they've put highlights and shadows. It's helping you to realise where these things naturally go. And it is helpful to see reference photos. Many artists use reference photos. So I think what I'm going to do is just bring that up to the very edge there. And this may not be the correct way of doing it. I am off the cuff, you know, just deciding where I want my shadows to be. Now we've got the ear back here, which I believe is actually not correct because I think the pink goes around and there's a black triangle in the middle of the ear on an original Jigglypuff from what I've seen when I've been looking at reference photos. But I'm just going to go with what this artist has done. So I'm going to add that bit of shadow there where the curl is sitting in front and overlapping that part of the ear, making it curved again. And then you have, you know, your basic plot and map of where you want your shadows to be. Then once you've done that, you can start to thicken them up a little bit. Now, how thick you do your shadows really depends on how big the subject is. So the Jigglypuff is our subject. Now, I can see that we've only got this much space from one side to the other of the Jigglypuff. So I need to think, I don't want my shadows to come right out into here because that's just not going to look right at all. I want my shadows to remain more to the edges and I need plenty of room to blend back into the base colour of the marker. So I am going to thicken this shadow a little bit, but not too much. So gauge it. If you've got a Jigglypuff that is this big on your page, you're going to need more area of shadow. Okay, but this is a smaller area that I'm colouring, so I just really need to be careful about how far I go with my shadows. So I'm just thickening that and I am joining it to where I had shadow here at the bottom. We're still maintaining that thick, that little thickness of line there that we've left. Thickness of line, that is the worst jumble of words I've ever heard. We're still maintaining that gap. And we're making sure that the inner edge of this is nice and light. Just a feather touch on the inside because that is going to blend with the next pink. So this would be our first plot. Now we're going to get the next colour, which is the hot pink that I'm using. And we're going to start extending those shadows inward. So we'll start with his arm here. We'll go over the edge of the processed red that we used. And we will scumble a blend in there. As I say, Prismacolor are the best blending pencil. If you can't get hold of them, obviously you can do this with any kind of pencil. It might just take a little bit of a different technique, a lighter hand, to get them to blend. But already, hopefully you can see, if I'm being very, very light with this, like super light, let me show you on the back of here. Right, this is how I would normally colour, right? And if I go really, really super light, you can barely even see any pigment. But this is what we want because we're trying to get this to blend in with the marker base colour. And I hope I'm not sounding too patronising. I would hate for people to think that I'm trying to be patronising, because believe me, I am not the best at colouring out there, and I'm not the, you know, the queen of colouring. So you don't have to listen to me. I may not have the best way of doing things. This is just my way of doing things, and I'm just trying to make people who have started off on markers with the new marker colouring trend, I'm trying to make transition into pencils really easy to follow and understand. So yeah, just people who've been with me on this channel for a long time will know that I am very much on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to I guess bigging up my own work. I'm one of these that's very self-deprecating, and I don't really believe that anything I do is that good. And I'm not doing that to fish for compliments, because that's cringy too, and I know I'm not good taking compliments, but I just don't want people to come to this channel brand new, fresh from the marker world, and think, oh my goodness, she's so patronising and using all this really simple basic language as if we're children. It's not that at all. And again, you know, I've probably, in my social anxiety now, gone on a bit too long about that, but just to make that clear. And I hope that if you are new to the channel, that you will subscribe and come and watch some more of my videos, because I have, you know, done a lot of tutorials on different coloured pencil techniques and markers in the past, but mostly pencils. And I just really love to have, you know, a new sort of community of people that have come from the marker trend. I'd love to welcome you to this channel and get you into pencils as well and other mixed media. So again, I'm just thickening this shadow. I am using this over the top of the Process Red pencil to blend it out. You can use a blender pencil if you wish. I always like to try and blend with the coloured pencils if I can though, because it keeps the vibrancy and it doesn't create any weird speckly texture that blenders can sometimes do. But again, when we get to the inside, I'm going to keep it so light that you can barely see it, and it hopefully starts to blend in with the background. It may not. This is blended in quite well. This one looks a little bit more harsh, so I probably will go back and get that Deco Pink pencil, which is more or less the same colour, and blend that in a bit. We'll just do this bit first. I'm going to turn it again because my wrist is going a bit funny. So we'll turn, going over the Process Red, flattening the pencil. So again, if you've come from markers, you may have heard of tooth in the paper, and you may know what that means, you may not, so I'll just explain it. But paper, if you look at it really close up in a microscope, depending on what kind of paper it is, of course, because you've got smooth papers and rough papers, but if you look up paper under the microscope, you will see that it is made of lots of hills and valleys. It's like this, the surface of paper. And when we colour lightly, we're colouring across the top of these valleys, but you'll see white texture underneath. Like, let me show you. So see, if I'm colouring lightly, you can see it's very speckly and there's lots of white. That's because we've not flattened the tooth of the paper. So when we put a bit more pressure on there, or more layers, we start to flatten the tooth, and there's none of the white speckles that you saw when I did it very lightly. And that is because when we're doing it hard, we are filling in all of these valleys, and we're making this. Hopefully that makes sense. Not the best teacher. So that is what tooth means. And like I said, some papers are rougher and some are smoother. Normally, marker paper is very smooth, and it allows the marker dyes to sit on top of the surface for a little bit longer while you blend, without, you know, it evaporating or drying. Whereas pencil paper is usually a little bit more toothy, not as toothy and as rough as a watercolour paper, you know, the really rough textured watercolour paper. But pencil paper tends to be a little bit rougher because the paper needs to catch the pigment of the pencil, you know. So if this was like a magazine paper and it was really smooth, you could do this and you might not even see it that much. But because this is rough, it is grasping the core of the pencil. So that's why you need a little bit more toothier paper. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a little bit. I'm just going to concentrate on his leg now. Do exactly the same thing. If you are wanting this very blurry edge, you will want your pencil to be, like I said, either slanted or blunt. We don't want it to be very sharp because that's going to give us really sharp lines. So just for these bits where you're transitioning to the next colour, you want it to be quite blunt and hazy and soft. Turn you around again and let's do this bit. Again, just keeping your pressure quite light. It can be heavier as you go over where the process red is because we want to kind of flatten that out and make it look almost printed. You know, we don't want any tooth of the paper to show through, or at least I don't with the way that I colour in my style. But when you're coming inward, ready to transition to a lighter colour, you need to keep that pressure really, really light. And a good way of doing that, if you are heavy-handed typically, is to move your fingers back further on the pencil body, and that just sort of forces you to be lighter because you can't put the amount of pressure on it that you would if it was down here. I've sort of figured it out, but if you are struggling with heavy pressure, then try that. Try just holding it a little bit further back the barrel. And we'll come up here. So I'm pushing quite hard over the process red, but making sure it's really nice and light and soft as I come further into the shape. Okay, so that's that bit done. And then let's do this curl underneath. So I don't think that's going to have like a really big shadow down the face, so I want to keep this quite restrained, this shadow, so I'm not going too much further away from the line. But I do want to flatten that because my personal colouring style is very vibrant and very opaque, so you can't really see any of the texture of the paper underneath. Just hoping I've not got a glare on this. I don't think I have. Sometimes my overhead light causes a glare to the pencil. I don't think you can see it. Maybe you can, hopefully not. But yeah, just carry on with that. And I am showing you this quite slowly, obviously. Again, not to be patronising or anything like that, but just because I want you to know exactly what it is that I'm doing, and I don't want to move too fast for anyone. I'm not going to colour the entire page on camera. I'm just going to do the Jigglypuff, maybe something else on the page, maybe something white, and then I'm going to do the rest so that you can see the difference. I'm going to do like a before and after when it's just flat marker and then with pencil on top. So let's do this last bit of curve now. So I'm just doing a little scumbly up at the line at the moment, just to get the thickness of the shadow down, and then we can start to push on that process red, flatten that tooth out a little bit. just move this to the side a little bit. Again, with your wrist movements, you might want to do that. It will definitely make colouring curves easier if you can give your wrist an easier time of it. Okay, so once you've done all of the hot pink bits, we're going to try that Deco Pink. So is it this one? Yes, Deco Pink. And that is as close as we're going to get with Prismacolor to the original marker colour on the base. And then with that, you can just do exactly the same thing, going over the hot pink this time and blending the edges of that out into the marker base. And you shouldn't, in theory, be able to tell that part of it is pencil and part of it is marker. But the reason why a lot of people do marker basing is to get that colour down fast and fill up the colour on the paper fast. So obviously when you colour something with markers, you've got no white left on the paper. Whereas when you colour with pencils, you've got all of that tooth, you know, showing through underneath. So markers gets rid of any white of the paper. And it still leaves you with the grippy tooth to use pencil. So with this lightest colour, you can always use that as an overall blender as well. So going back over your previous colours and sort of smushing them down into the tooth, especially with Prismacolor, will leave you with a really lovely, flat, seamless look. So if there are any areas that you think maybe your processed red, you can see it looks a bit harsh, there's a bit of a line to it, you can go over it with your lightest colour and it will flatten it a little bit more and blend it. So we were going down here, weren't we? So again, just on the very edge of the hot pink, the second colour, and then blending up into the processed red. And when we're coming into the centre and the marker base, we're lifting the pressure off of the pencil and just letting it blend. So it looks like it's naturally blended. Let's do this bit here on the curve. So I'm really sort of pushing to blend the two previous pinks, pushing that into the tooth just to burnish it a little bit. Burnishing is where there is no tooth left on the paper because you've pressed hard, you've done multiple layers and there's no more grippage. There's no more grippage left to add more layers and it looks really flat. So burnishing and blending are two different things. And then again, lightly bringing this down into the face so that it almost seamlessly blends in with the marker. It's not going to be perfect, at least mine isn't. But you'll see as we go along how it's really created more dimension and interest to the colouring page rather than block colouring with markers. Now I know obviously you can blend with alcohol markers, that's one of their biggest features. So you can achieve this look with alcohol markers, it's just I find a little bit harder to blend with markers than I do with pencils, especially using a nice soft pencil like a Prismacolor. But that's probably because I've been using them for a lot longer and I'm more proficient with pencil than marker. But I do have a video somewhere on how to blend with alcohol markers. It might be a bit outdated now and it might be from before I was practiced very much with markers. Maybe I should do an updated one. I've got some skin tone blending videos with alcohol markers as well, if you're wanting to learn how to blend skin with markers. But I'm going to be doing this trainer's skin with pencil. So again, people that are coming from the marker community watching this video, welcome. I hope that you will subscribe and join me. And I hope that my sort of back catalogue of hundreds of videos may help with anything you are trying to want to achieve moving to pencils. And yeah, I'm just really, really happy that colouring has once again sort of taken off and it's trending. Obviously this time it's all about that bold and easy colouring, those really, really simple images. And this is another reason why I chose a different type of image for this video, because obviously if we're wanting to move on from markers to markers and pencil, or just pencil, we're also going to want to be moving our skills, elevating our skills up to more detailed illustrations. Now this by no means is a detailed illustration. All of the spaces are really wide. There's no tiny weeny little intricate details. So this is like this kind of illustration with this kind of space and detail is your next step up from bold and easy, probably. I think anyway. But you can apply the techniques I'm showing you today to any colouring page, whether it's a child's page or I was going to say like a Vincent van Gogh page, but he didn't do colouring books. But you know what I'm trying to say. You can apply them anywhere on any kind of illustration. And once you've sort of got these techniques, you'll be able to colour more detailed work. But this is, I quite like this level of detail actually. It's enjoyable to do. There's not too much intricacy. And it's fun, which is the most important thing, of course. Now I can see quite a harsh line with that process red there, so I'm going to bring, let me think, can I do it with hot pink? Yeah, I'm going to bring the hot pink back in and just blend that line down a little bit more. Back in with the Deco Pink. I think that looks a little bit softer, hopefully. The camera might not be showing it up, but it is to my eyes. I do keep giving it a little blow. You might want to get yourself a cute little duster brush, because you will notice that you get a lot of crumbs and debris from pencils, some more than others. And if you swipe them, which I also do, shouldn't do it, it may discolour where you're swiping. It may, you know, transfer onto other parts of the page, which isn't great. Especially with Prismas, because they don't erase very well at all. If you're using a oil-based pencil, they tend to usually erase better than your wax base. Okay, so I think that's the top bit done. And all we've got left now is his little leg at the bottom. And there we go. It does not take long at all once you've got into the swing of it. So the first step, well, the first step is doing your alcohol marker base. The second step is mapping out where you want your shadow areas to be with your darker colour. And then you want your mid colour, your transition colour. And then you use the colour that is most close to the base colour in your pencils, and then it looks almost seamless. Now for these very white edges that we left, the little couple of millimetres at the side, you may want to use your lighter colour, which in my case is the Deco Pink, just to soften up the outer edge of your line. But I have always found that contrast is key when it comes to things looking super three-dimensional. So we don't want to get rid of all the white. If we can make our shadows as dark as possible and our whites as bright and light as possible, that's where your contrast comes from. And it's just better. It's just better. Right, so that is the Jigglypuff. I kind of think on this one, I can never leave things alone, as people who've been here a long time will tell you. I kind of think I just want to redefine that. And you can do, because if you're using Prismacolors, they're so opaque that sometimes when you're colouring over a darker colour with a lighter one, it can sort of mute the colour underneath and it's not as bold and vibrant as it was before. So then you need to go back in with like a second layer and just bring out the depth of the colour, bring that back out. And of course, use the medium colour to make sure it's all blended downward. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to be here all night perfecting it. So that is the Jigglypuff. As I said, with pencils being opaque, you may notice that they go over parts of the black outlines and make them look not as black and crisp. So in that case, you will need either a very sharp pencil, black pencil, or something like a fine liner. So this one here, this is a fine line drawing pen, and you can draw over and bring those black lines back to full crispness. But I would make that the very last thing that you do, because if I start colouring her hair now and I catch a little bit of that black, it's going to drag. So do that at the very end. I can do it here because I'm not going to be colouring anything else around this eye. So I can fill that in, make it look super black and crisp again. That one's okay. And then this here, I can probably fill that in. Yeah, and the rest I'm going to do when I finish colouring. That'll be my last step. The tongue. So I want to just quickly do something with this tongue just to make it look a little bit more 3D as well. So going back to my chart, this colour of this tongue is kind of matching with this pink, I think. Just simply called pink. So I'm going to grab that pencil and I'm going to test it against the back of the tongue. Yeah, it is pretty much the exact same colour. It's probably slightly darker. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of that into the back of the tongue where the shadow would be, toward the back of the mouth rather than the front here. And then I'm going to look at what's next to the pink. So we've got the hot pink, but that's not any darker than the pink. So then we also go to the processed red. So the processed red is a bit of a pinker colour. The magenta is a bit redder. So I actually want the magenta for this tongue because I want the tongue to be a little bit redder while the body is pinker. So I'm going to go for the magenta. Make sure it's sharpened, watch your ears. And then with a very light hand, because I don't want this to be too dark or too red, I'm going to go over the very back edge of the tongue. Are you a tongue or a tongue pronouncer? I'm a tongue. So this is just adding a little bit of depth and a little bit of contrast and form to the tongue. And we don't want to do too much. I'll just go underneath this tooth because it is an overlapping object. We don't want to go too harsh with this. And then back in with the pink that matches the marker colour to blur out those harsh lines of the magenta and make it nice and smoothly blended with the marker underneath. And it's just that little bit of contrast. It makes a big, big difference. Now, if you've been colouring with markers, you may have also heard of white paint pens or gel pens to add highlights onto things. And I love adding, people will tell you that have been here for a long time, it's one of the biggest things that I do is just add loads of white highlights onto everything, whether it's needed or not. So now that I'm actually looking for a Posca, I can't find one. Oh, here we go. So my favourite white pen to use is a Posca pen of a specific size. The one that I use is called PC1M and it is 0.7 millimeters. This is not the thinnest one you can get. It's one up from that. But I find with the thinnest one, the nib gets really blocked up on it. It's like a metal nib and it gets really blocked. These ones have always done me well, so I use this. So on the Jigglypuff, you may want to do a little bit of highlight. Let me just, this isn't clean. Make sure your Posca is clean, that should be the first thing. So let me just do a little scribble on the back of here. You can see it's got some blue on it from something I was doing the other night. So we're going to make sure this is clean. Make sure it's shaken and pumped a few times, but be careful because sometimes it can blurt out paint. And you might just want to, that's better, add a little bit of a white highlight. Now I know I said to colour these in with the lightest pink, you know, very lightly, but I don't want to do it all the way round. I just want to have this little bit where the light is bouncing off of the Jigglypuff. And I'm going to do some here on the very midpoint of his face as well. And let's do a little bit here on his arm. I can very easily go quite mad with this. So I don't really want to do too much. Let's do just a little bit under here. Okay, that'll do. And if you've gone over into any of the white space that you want to remain white, like the tooth, you can use this as a little Tipp-Ex as well. So I think I am happy with that Jigglypuff. I think he's done. Just want to add in this black liner again, because I didn't do that one before. Yes, I think I'm happy. So I hope that on this video you have you've got what I'm trying to tell you and trying to teach you. Not very well, because I am a rambler and I just go on and I can't remember words, and I don't know what I'm talking about half of the time. So I hope that you've learned something from this, and I hope that now I've pulled back and you can see the rest of the image, you can really tell the difference between something that's had some blending, some shading and highlights against very basic block marker colouring. There's nothing to say that this is better and this is worse. It's what you enjoy doing that matters. But this is just a little video to help you try and elevate your skills a little bit more, and especially if you're moving into pencils from markers. So I'm going to go and finish this on my own time, and I will put a side-by-side picture of before pencils and after pencils right now, so you can see how it turned out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon on Colour with Claire.